Then I lost the contract that was supposed to change my life. And everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me came apart at the seams. I want to tell you something before I get into it. I'm not someone who talks about my failures easily. I spent most of my adult life believing that if you worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, and showed up consistently enough, the people around you would do the same. That belief held me together for a long time. Until it didn't. My name is Daniel Osei. I'm 36 years old. I'm a licensed civil engineer, and for the better part of a decade, I ran a small but respected infrastructure consultancy out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We designed drainage systems, road rehabilitation plans, site grading layouts, the unglamorous backbone of how cities stay functional. It wasn't the kind of work that got written up in magazines, but it mattered, and I was good at it. I started the firm when I was 28, right after leaving a mid-size engineering group where I'd spent 4 years learning the business from the inside. I had saved enough to rent a small office, buy the software I needed, and survive about 8 months without a paying client if it came to that. I called the company Osei Infrastructure Solutions, straightforward, maybe a little plain, but I wanted it to say exactly what it was. For the first 2 years, I hustled in the way that small business owners hustle when nobody knows their name yet. County projects, subcontracting under larger firms, the kind of work that keeps the lights on and builds a track record even when it doesn't build a reputation. And then slowly things started to move. A township drainage redesign in Cabarrus County. A municipal road assessment in Gaston. Word got around that my reports were thorough. My timelines were honest, and I didn't overpromise what my team could deliver. By the time I was 32, I had 4 full-time employees, 2 long-term subcontracting relationships, and a client list I was genuinely proud of. It wasn't a large operation, but it was mine, built from nothing, with my own hands and my own name on the door. Around that time, I brought in a business partner. His name was Raymond Cole. We had known each other since graduate school, we'd been in the same cohort, studied for the same licensure exams, complained about the same professors over the same cheap coffee. Raymond was sharp, sociable in ways I was not, and genuinely talented at the relational side of the business that I found harder. Client dinners, presentations, the kind of conversation where you make someone feel like you understand their problem before you've even fully analyzed it. I had been doing everything alone for 4 years by then. The administration, the technical work, the client management, the billing. I was tired in a specific way that people who run small businesses alone understand, not burned out, not ready to quit, but stretched thin in a way that had started to affect my judgment in small moments. When Raymond suggested we formalize a partnership, it felt like the right time. It felt like relief. We drew up an agreement, 49-51, with me retaining the majority stake as the founder. Raymond would lead business development and client relations. I would lead the technical side. We shook hands in my office on a Tuesday afternoon in March, and I felt, for the first time in 4 years, like I wasn't carrying the whole thing by myself. The first year of the partnership was good. Better than good, honestly. Raymond's instinct for relationships started opening doors that I had been knocking on for years without anyone answering. He had a way of walking into a room and making the other person feel like he'd been thinking about their project for weeks. It worked. We landed 2 county contracts in the first 8 months, and the second one, a road rehabilitation project for a fast-growing suburb east of the city, was the largest single contract in the firm's history. And then came the Millbridge contract. Millbridge was a township about 30 miles north of Charlotte that had been expanding rapidly and needed a comprehensive stormwater master plan, a multi-phase project that would take 3 years to fully execute and was valued at just over $1.2 million. For a firm our size, that number was not just significant, it was transformative. It meant we could hire 2 additional engineers, invest in upgraded modeling software, build the kind of operational depth that would let us compete for even larger projects in the future. Raymond made first contact with the township administrator. He set up the initial meetings, prepared the proposal presentations, handled the follow-up. I did the technical writing, the methodology sections, the cost modeling. It was exactly the division of labor we had agreed to, and it worked the way it was supposed to work. After 4 months of proposals and meetings, and revisions and waiting, Millbridge selected OSI Infrastructure Solutions. I called my mother that evening. She had been asking about the firm every Sunday for years, the way mothers do, carefully, because she was proud but also always slightly worried, the way she had been since I told her at 22 that I was going to start my own company someday. When I told her we'd gotten Millbridge, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Daniel, I knew you would." And that was it. That was enough. 4 weeks after we received the award letter, Raymond came into my office and closed the door behind him. He sat down across from me, which was slightly unusual. Raymond generally preferred to talk standing up, leaning against a door frame, like he was always half on his way somewhere. Sitting down was different. Sitting down meant he wanted me still. He said he needed to talk to me about the direction of the firm. He said he had been thinking about it for a while. He said that with Millbridge now in hand, he believed it was the right moment to revisit the ownership structure. He said that given the role he had played in bringing the contract in, he thought a 50-50 split was more appropriate going forward. I listened to all of it without interrupting. And then I said that I appreciated him raising it, that I understood his perspective, but that the agreement we had drawn up was clear. The firm was founded as mine. The equity structure reflected that. The work he had done was valued, enormously valued, and his compensation reflected it. But the ownership stake was not something I was prepared to renegotiate. He nodded, said okay, said he understood, and we moved on. Or at least that's what I thought. The following weeks were normal on the surface. We staffed up for Millbridge. We set up the project timeline. Raymond handled the kickoff meeting with the township, which went well by all accounts. I started digging into the site data. But there were small things I noticed, and then tried not to notice. Because when you're in the middle of the most important project of your company's life, you don't have the luxury of following instincts down side roads. Raymond started arriving later, taking longer lunches, closing his office door for calls in a way he hadn't done before. When I asked him about a township follow-up email I'd been waiting on, he said it was handled, but when I checked the correspondence file, there was nothing there. When I asked one of our junior engineers about a deliverable she'd been working on with Raymond, she seemed uncertain in a way that told me her direction had changed, but she wasn't sure how to say so. I told myself I was reading into things, that the stress of a large project made everything feel more charged than it was. That Raymond and I had a good partnership and a documented history and a contract that protected both of us. That the conversation about the equity split was behind us. I was wrong about all of it. I found out on a Wednesday morning in November, 8 weeks after we'd begun work on Millbridge. I received a call from the township administrator, a man named Keith Prater, who I had spoken to exactly twice in the preceding months, both times briefly, because Raymond was the relationship lead on the project. Keith called my direct line and asked if I had received the notice. I said I wasn't sure what notice he meant. He was quiet for a moment, and then, carefully, he said that the township had received a letter the previous week from Raymond, on company letterhead, stating that OSI Infrastructure Solutions was dissolving and that its assets, including the Millbridge contract, were being transferred to a new entity, a firm called Cole Technical Group. I sat in my chair and felt something I cannot fully describe. It wasn't anger right away. It was more like the sensation of the floor shifting beneath you, a physical vertigo, a sudden confusion about what is solid and what isn't. I asked Keith if he could read me the letter. Oh, he did. It was written in my voice, or something close to my voice, the professional register I used in formal communications, the specific phrasing I used for transition notifications. Whoever had written it knew how I wrote. They had studied it. They had replicated it well enough that a township administrator who had spoken to me twice had no reason to question it. I thanked Keith, told him there had been a serious misunderstanding, and asked him to hold all action on the letter until he heard from me directly. He agreed cautiously. I could hear in his voice that he was already calculating risk, already thinking about what this uncertainty meant for the project timeline. I hung up the phone and sat in my office for approximately 40 seconds. Then I walked down the hallway to Raymond's door. It was closed. I knocked. No answer. I opened it. His office was empty. Not temporarily empty, the way an office looks when someone has stepped out, empty in the deliberate way. The personal items were gone. The framed certifications he'd hung on the wall. The desk organizer he'd brought in his first week. The coffee maker he kept on the credenza because he didn't like sharing the one in the break room. Well, he was gone. The following 2 weeks were among the hardest of my professional life. I contacted my attorney that afternoon and she began working immediately to document what had occurred and send cease and desist correspondence to Raymond. I contacted Millbridge and provided them with the full corporate documentation showing that OSI Infrastructure Solutions was a standing entity, that I was its majority owner, and that no dissolution had occurred. Keith Prater was professional and patient through all of it, but I could feel the contract shifting underneath me. Not lost yet, but no longer certain. I contacted the other clients we were actively serving. I reviewed every file Raymond had access to. I audited the correspondence logs. What I found, laid out in the full picture, was methodical. Raymond had spent at least 2 months preparing the transition. He had established Cole Technical Group as a legal entity 6 weeks before I had any awareness of it. He had made contact with 2 of our existing subcontractors to discuss their availability for future work under a new firm name. He had accessed and copied technical deliverable templates, project management systems, and client contact files that were proprietary to our firm. He had been planning this from inside the partnership, while we were working together every day, while I was treating him as someone I trusted with the whole of what I had built. I want to be honest about what that felt like, because I think when people tell these stories, they sometimes focus on the strategic and the legal and the aftermath, and they leave out the part where you sit in your car in the parking garage for 15 minutes before you're able to drive home. The part where you get to your apartment and stand in the kitchen for a while without doing anything, not because you're paralyzed, but because you genuinely don't know what to do with your hands. The part where you call a friend to tell them what happened and then stop halfway through because you realize you can't fully explain it yet. Not because you lack the words, but because you're not sure you believe it yourself. I had trusted Raymond with my firm, with my name on the door, with 8 years of work, and he had looked at all of that, weighed it, and decided the most valuable use of the access I had given him was to use it to build something for himself at my expense. I kept working. That was the decision I made, and I want to be clear that it was a decision. It was not automatic, it was not easy. It was a choice I made every morning for about 3 months straight, to get up and go to the office and keep the firm running and not let the weight of what had happened pull the whole structure down with it. My attorney filed suit. The legal process was slow and expensive and consumed mental bandwidth I couldn't really afford, but it moved forward. I was transparent with my employees. They deserved to know the situation. 2 of them, the junior engineers, responded with a steadiness that surprised me. They said they weren't going anywhere. They said they believed in the firm. That meant more than I was able to express in the moment. The Millbridge situation resolved after 6 weeks of uncertainty. Keith Prater and the township's legal counsel reviewed the full record, the founding documents, the partnership agreement, the cease and desist, my attorney's correspondence, and determined that the contract award was valid and remained with OSI Infrastructure Solutions. The letter Raymond had sent was disregarded. The project continued. I've never been someone who cried at work, but I will tell you that when Keith called me with that news on a Friday afternoon in January, I had to put the phone down briefly before I finished the conversation. The civil litigation took another 14 months to resolve. Raymond's new firm, Cole Technical Group, had solicited 2 of our subcontractors and landed one county proposal before our injunction was granted, halting his use of our proprietary project management systems and client data. The settlement, which I am not able to detail fully, was meaningful. It did not undo the damage, the months of uncertainty, the legal fees, the time I spent on lawyers and documentation that could have been spent on engineering, but it acknowledged formally and legally what he had done. Raymond Cole does not, to my knowledge, operate Cole Technical Group any longer. I am not sure what he is doing, and I have made a deliberate choice not to spend energy finding out. I want to talk about what the experience changed in me. Not just the practical things, the restructured partnership policies, the stricter access controls, the external legal review I now build into any significant agreement. Those changes were obvious and necessary, but there were other changes less obvious that took longer to understand. I am more careful now about the difference between someone who is good at their work and someone who shares your values. Those are not the same thing, and I had conflated them for years in Raymond's case and in other cases before his. Being excellent at a skill is not evidence of integrity. Knowing how to make people feel understood is not the same as actually caring about them. I had let performance be my main indicator of character, and that was a mistake I will not make again. I am also more honest about loneliness, the loneliness of running something alone, of carrying the full weight of a decision and not having someone to hand half of it to. That loneliness was real, and it made me vulnerable to an arrangement that felt like relief but was actually risk I hadn't examined carefully enough. I brought Raymond in part because I was tired of being alone in it. I understand that now. And I think the version of me that makes decisions today would have been slower, more careful, more willing to stay in the discomfort of doing it alone until I had found someone who earned that level of trust over a much longer period of time. OSI Infrastructure Solutions is still operating. We completed Phase 1 of the Millbridge Stormwater Master Plan on time and within budget. Phase 2 begins later this year. The firm has 5 full-time employees now, one more than before the crisis, and 2 of them have been with me through the entire period I've described. We are not larger than we were before, but we are, I believe, more solid, more clear-eyed about what we are and how we intend to operate. I still work in my office most evenings. The work is still unglamorous in the way infrastructure work always has been: drainage profiles and grading calculations and soil reports and county review meetings. But there is something I find in that work that I could not find if I were doing something else. A precision, an honesty. The numbers are what they are. The water moves where the physics says it will move. You cannot flatter a drainage coefficient or charm a soil-bearing capacity. You either got it right or you didn't, and the work will tell you which one. I think about Raymond sometimes, not with anger, not anymore, or at least not primarily. I think about the version of the partnership we could have had if he had come to me honestly and said, I want more equity. I want to feel like this is mine too. I think about whether there was a version of that conversation that we could have had productively, where I might have found a way to give him more of what he needed without it costing either of us what it actually cost. I don't know, maybe not. I am not built to give someone half of something I built alone. That might be a limitation, but it is an honest one. And I think honesty, even when it creates conflict, is a better foundation for any arrangement than the quiet resentment of someone who wanted something different and never said so, until they decided to take it instead. What I know is this: I lost the contract that was supposed to change my life for about 6 weeks. And during those 6 weeks, I learned who was in my corner and who had never been. I learned which of my employees believed in the work and which were there for the convenience of a paycheck. I learned that my clients, the good ones, were more interested in the quality of my judgment than in the smoothness of my presentation. And I learned that the thing I had spent 8 years building was sturdier than I had given it credit for. The contract came back, the firm stood, and the name on the door is still mine. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy, or because I think I am owed recognition for surviving something difficult. People survive difficult things every day, often with far fewer resources and options than I had. I tell it because I spent a long time thinking that loyalty was something you could assume from someone who shared your education, your history, your goals. That shared background was enough of a foundation. That trust was something you could extend freely, and it would be returned in kind. It isn't. Trust is something you watch someone earn over time, across multiple situations, including the ones where honoring it costs them something. Anything short of that is hope dressed up as certainty. I hope that's useful to someone. I think it probably is. Build carefully, watch closely, and when someone shows you what they value most, believe them.